Translanguaging classroom practices. Let us look at a number of more examples so that we get a clear image of how we can use translanguaging in our classrooms. Now, this is, for instance, an advanced biology classroom in a US context. The learners are Spanish. The textbook they are reading is in English. What happens is that the students are given supplementary material in Spanish. So, when we say supplementary material, that means that the material that is there in the textbook in English, it is not replicated, rather more supplementary material related to the same subject is given in Spanish. The whole instructional dialogue between the teacher and students, peer-to-peer, all of that, it takes place in Spanish. Now, what happens is in this advanced biology class that when it comes to writing or doing of the exercises, it is done both in English and in Spanish. So not one language is used to deal with the exercises, but both languages are used over here. So this is slightly different from the translanguaging arrangement that we discussed earlier. Now the question is, why did they choose to have both languages for writing purposes rather than just having one of them? Now they needed English because they wanted the learners to be able to answer the text or answer the exercises in the text in English, because these children had to be prepared for advanced placement examination in English. If the students had to be placed for this examination and had to be prepared for it, then the question comes, why were the learners allowed to write the answers in Spanish? And this is for the simple reason because they wanted their learners to actually learn the content in terms of actually understanding the concepts clearly. So, by allowing the learners to write in Spanish, the teacher will be able to trace the conceptual learning of these Spanish learners. So, this avoids the problem for the teacher that when a Spanish learner, second language speaker of English, writes the answer in English, then the teacher does not quite know whether if the answer is deficient in some way, is it because the child does not know the language in which he or she wants to express himself, or if there is a conceptual problem in understanding the subject. Now, this is the main aim, but this also allows the learners to express themselves freely, discuss their arguments in Spanish, but it does not stop over here. Later on, the learners are allowed to actually then translate it or to say the same thing in English also. So at one time, these Spanish learners are dealing with one type of cognitive challenge. One cognitive challenge was to understand the subject and then to express what they have understood. And the second challenge was to actually put it in a second language which they also did not know. By dividing the task in two different places, they have simplified the task for the learners. Now we come to this 5th grade dual language classroom in US, which is not about translanguaging, but you can see the comparison. So social studies, this is the subject. Again, the learners are Spanish and the social studies is being taught in Spanish. However, the state test is both in Spanish and English. What happens is that the student that or students that opt for answering the question in English comes to only one student, because they have not been prepared to write their answers in English and to express themselves in English. In comparison to it, you have this 5th grade translanguaging arrangement. What happens over here? All text and discussion in Spanish, lesson reviewed in English, and then the test is in English and Spanish, but the learners are allowed to use Spanish to English dictionaries while they take the test. So the whole point is to give some access to minority language speakers so they are able to achieve or access academic excellence, and they have improved learning outcomes. And in addition to it, they also have this better grasp over languages that they know.